It wasn't the figures that caught me off guard, nor was it the timing. What truly unsettled me was the handwriting, the unmistakable curve of an M, like in the word melody. The note said simply, "Clear your desk by 5." No signature, no explanation, just a pale yellow sticky note trembling slightly in the AC breeze stuck to the top right corner of my laptop. Right beside it lay a contract worth $950 million, 11 months of late nights, endless legal rewrites, and secret negotiations all distilled into one thick stack of paper. And now, a tiny post-it told me I was no longer welcome at the table. I blinked once, then twice. The world around me seemed frozen meanwhile. The final preparations for the deal pressed on. Suits rustled, pens clicked, glasses chimed softly in the corner, all awaiting a post-signature toast I was clearly no longer invited to. The Zintrex team sat poised, ready, oblivious to the political storm unfolding quietly beside them. Their eyes stood, frozen like a misplaced portrait in the wrong gallery. Jared Vaughn, our new interim CEO, wasn't even present naturally. He wasn't. He hadn't attended a single strategic meeting face-to-face, but somehow knew exactly when to leave a note. It was vague enough to dodge HR scrutiny, but sharp enough to deliver a cruel message. And the worst part? Not a single person spoke up. I glanced around people I had trained, coached, and even covered for suddenly busied themselves with adjusting cuffs, checking phones, rereading papers they'd clearly memorized, eyes downcast, faces rigid. None dared meet my gaze. In that moment, I wasn't just fired. I was utterly abandoned. But they'd all forgotten one critical detail. The system Zintrex was acquiring, the very backbone of this deal, bore my fingerprints in every clause, every condition, every hidden dependency. Not just in theory, I had built it not for them, not on company servers, and definitely not under their legal umbrella. I reached for the contract. The paper felt heavier than usual, almost as if it anticipated what I was about to do. Flipping to the final page, I found the empty signature block waiting patiently. My name wasn't meant to be there, yet I still held the pen, and they still needed my hand 6 months before the note, before the silence, before the betrayal. There was only hope. It all began with an email titled, "Zintrex Initiative Internal Lead Nomination." My name was boldly highlighted in the first line, and I had to read it twice. After 10 years buried in the trenches of corporate infrastructure, I wasn't accustomed to such direct recognition. The role? Lead architect for Galvix's most ambitious acquisition yet, a $950 million merger with Zintrex Holdings, a global logistics tech giant. I was tasked with designing the architecture that would hold the entire cross-border framework together. Regulatory compliance, tax structures, intellectual property transition. They claimed it would be the defining work of my career, and I believed them. The following morning, I met with Meera Patel, a junior strategist who had worked under me for nearly 2 years. Bright, insightful, and fiercely loyal. When I told her I'd asked her to be my right hand on the project, she literally gasped. "You're serious?" she asked, eyes wide behind her round glasses. "As a heart attack," I grinned. "But don't expect much sleep for the next few months." "Worth it," she replied without hesitation. That night, I called my mother. "Mom, I can't make it to Denver next weekend," I said softly. Galvix had just handed me the lead on something huge, globally huge. She was silent for a moment before her voice came through warm, weathered with pride and distance. "I miss you, Mel. You've chased this your whole life. Just promise me when it's done, you'll come home." I smiled into the phone. "I will once I finish this project. I'll come home, I promise." The first 6 weeks were a whirlwind of whiteboards, drafts, diagrams, and impossible meetings. I sketched system blueprints by day and refined them at night on my personal laptop, mostly because Galvix's secure system didn't meet my standards. Mira brought coffee so often the barista nearby memorized both our orders. But something felt off. Jared Vaughn, our interim CEO, had yet to attend a single design session budgets were shifting, and behind the glass walls of executive conference rooms, conversations fell silent whenever I passed by one Friday evening. Mira looked up from her screen. "Hey, do you trust him?" she asked cautiously. "Trust who?" I replied, "Jared?" I didn't answer instead. I saved my file under a new name, Thorn Framework Jafter V. One that weekend, I registered an LLC, Thorn Parallel Group, with help from Camille, an old law school roommate who'd become a corporate attorney. A freelance consulting firm, I told Camille. "You think I'm planning to moonlight?" "Just planning," I said. I never intended to use it. I never imagined I'd need to, but something inside whispered, "Build your own vault, just in case they try to lock you out of theirs." By the 8th week, the system's skeleton was complete. Mira had stepped into her role faster than I expected, and I still believed in the project, the future, and the promise of recognition. What I hadn't realized yet was that unchecked hope can become the perfect trap. They thought I was only building a system. They didn't see that I was crafting a shield. The framework had grown beyond mere diagrams into something alive, agile, modular, and elegant. Each infrastructure segment connected like vertebrae in a spine, supporting layers of legal protocols, licensing channels, and operational redundancies able to survive across multiple regulatory environments. It was mine, my mind, my rules, my design, yet it bore Galvix's badge. I didn't hate the company, not yet. But I didn't trust it either by the 9th week. My unease hardened into certainty. Jared Vaughn, barely visible during early stages, now dropped cryptic remarks in executive briefings. "We need to think long-term legacy roles are under reassessment." Once, with a thin smile, he added, "No one is irreplaceable." He never named me, but it wasn't necessary. So I made a decision, not out of spite, but survival. Camille met me at a quiet cafe off 3rd Street, across from the city library. Her dark hair was tied in a low knot. She wore the subtle, professional look of a lawyer, neutral blouse, perfect posture, eyes constantly scanning. "You're not leaving Galvix, are you?" she asked. Before I even sat down, "No," I said. "I'm staying, but I need a firewall." Camille didn't ask any questions. She opened her laptop and began typing, "Name of the holding entity?" "Thorn Parallel Group." She paused. "That's very you." I smiled faintly. "Sounds like something from a circuit board, right?" Within an hour, the LLC was real, legally registered, tax compliant, and airtight on paper, just a boutique systems consultancy. Nothing fancy, but in reality, it now owned the skeleton of the system I had built. The first complete version of the infrastructure blueprint was officially logged, time-stamped, and licensed under Thorn Parallel Group. Galvix retained access to my work. But I now had a solid legal foundation to stand on back at the office. I carried on as if nothing had shifted Mira, and I stayed late into the evenings, pushing code, her joking that I was turning her into a ninja architect. She never questioned why I occasionally saved copies of our work to a secure drive unlinked to the company network. She trusted me, and I didn't take that lightly. By week 10's end, we began embedding the system into early drafts of the Zintrex contract Camille suggested slipping in a non-disruptive clause on page 84 of the technical appendix, listing authorized infrastructure integrators, with Thorn Parallel Group third on that list, sandwiched between two dummy shell companies. No one batted an eye. It went unnoticed. I reread that page 3 times before passing it to legal. This wasn't about undermining anyone or staging a mutiny. I just didn't want to enter a boardroom knife fight unarmed. My pride didn't come from owning the system, but from knowing I had designed it well enough to defend it and shield the people who built it with me. Mira was flourishing. She had just pitched a module refinement that cut deployment lag by 17%, earning her first direct praise from Galvix's engineering director. Watching her eyes light up during that meeting reminded me what it once felt like before power overshadowed partnership. One night, Camille messaged me, "If this ever burns down, you walk away with the blueprints and your name intact." I didn't reply, but looked over the system again, each line of logic, every contingency protocol, and felt something quietly settle in my chest. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was protection, designed not to fight back, but to survive the fire. The first time I met Jared Vaughn, he wore a jacket that cost more than my rent. Slick gray wool, slim fit, no tie, just expensive confidence. He shook my hand without meeting my eyes and said, "I've heard good things, Melody. Hope you're ready to adapt." No smile, no warmth. I didn't feel welcome. Jared was interim CEO after Charles Lynn, the man who'd built Galvix from scratch, but resigned under pressures that sounded anything but personal. Charles had mentored me and valued people beyond numbers. Jared seemed to see people as temporary contracts. From day one, things changed. Quietly calculated legacy managers, reassigned project leads replaced with fresh hires of questionable skills. Charles's old team started disappearing one by one, pushed out or politely moved to unfamiliar departments. At first, I told myself I was imagining it, that people were just moving on. But when Mira whispered, "They reassigned Mark to compliance in Miami without telling him," I felt a cold weight settle in my gut. Then it was my turn. In a bi-weekly strategy meeting, Jared took the head seat and cut me off mid-sentence. "Let's skip the deep tech dive." "Melody, executives don't need engineering lessons." The room fell silent. I glanced around, hoping for support. Only Olivia Tran, our senior financial analyst I'd worked alongside for 4 years, met my eyes. She'd even stayed with me in the hospital waiting room when my mother had surgery now. She looked down and pretended to write. I finished quietly. Later, alone in my office, I stared at the clause Camille helped me bury inside the Zintrex contract. Authorized infrastructure integrators include Thorn Parallel Group. I hovered over that line. Considering deleting it, I didn't want war or betrayal. I just wanted to do the job right and be part of something real. But that meeting, the interruption, the humiliation, the silence of those who'd once had my back cracked something inside me. I closed the window. The claws stayed. Later that week, Jared rolled out a new performance review initiative, realignment reviews, but only those linked to Charles Lynn's era were targeted. Mine was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Led by a new VP, I'd never met Mira caught me leaving the building. "Are they trying to force you out?" she asked softly. I didn't answer, but I knew at home sleep eluded me. On my balcony with a glass of white wine, I reread an email from legal confirming the Thorn clause was accepted without question. My thumb hovered over Camille's contact before I wrote in my notebook, "Don't delete anything you might need later." The next morning, Olivia passed me in the hallway. I thought she might stop to apologize or offer a smile, but she walked on like we'd never shared years of collaboration, crises, and inside jokes. The wind had shifted. I knew it. I wasn't just being pushed aside. I was being erased, politely but deliberately. The people I'd relied on were already gone, just waiting for the paperwork to catch up by week 11. The silence was no accident. It was a strategy. My emails took longer to reach recipients. Shared folders I once accessed freely suddenly required new permissions. Calendar invites for project syncs came without my name. At first, I blamed the system. Glitches, administrative errors. I even filed a support ticket, only to be told curtly, "Your access appears normal on our end." It wasn't on Monday, at the leadership sync, now renamed Program Pulse, I realized I was the only one without printed materials. Mira whispered, "They sent it to the internal list this morning. I'm still on it." She gave me a soft look and said nothing. I noticed how people now avoided me. Eye contact was brief or absent. Conversations halted when I entered, never resuming Olivia, who'd walked with me to lunch every Wednesday, now took the elevator early or late. But never with me, even my desk felt off. Pens slightly moved, documents rearranged. As if someone was testing how attentive I still was, I told myself it was all in my head. I wanted to believe that then came HR after emailing for clarification on my performance review, something I'd previously led and been praised for. 2 days passed, then 5. No reply. I followed up twice more, met only with silence. That Friday morning, I made my own way to the HR office. Janelle, who had known me for 6 years, barely glanced my way. "It's in progress," she replied without looking up, already focused back on her screen. "I just need to know who's been assigned. You'll get a calendar invite if necessary." "That's all I can tell you, Melody." I paused for a moment, then turned and left later that evening. I found myself alone in the quiet lounge on the 17th floor. A place mostly deserted after 6 o'clock outside. The skyline appeared pale and ghost-like, twilight casting washed-out blues over the glass. I gazed out, wondering when exactly I had shifted from someone valued to someone invisible. Was it something I did? Had I misread signs? Was I too cautious, too controlling, too difficult? My phone suddenly buzzed a text from an unknown number. No name, no introduction, just one chilling line. "Be careful. They're waiting for you to falter so they can cut you out of the deal." My stomach twisted. I stared at the message for a full minute. No follow-up. No typing bubble. Just silence. I looked around the office floor. Empty, except for cleaning staff moving like ghosts in the distance. I texted back, "Who is this?" No reply. My thoughts raced back over the past few weeks. Could it have been Mira? She was the only one still showing genuine concern, or at least trying to. Maybe it was a new hire, or even one of the interns. There was a quiet, watchful girl who always lingered near my spot during cross-functional meetings. I never learned her name. But I remembered how she looked at me the day Jared cut me off in that strategy meeting. Not with pity, but with recognition. I returned to my desk. Nearly 8 o'clock now. The office nearly dark. I sat down and opened the contract folder again. My hands moved on their own to page 84. The technical appendix listing authorized infrastructure integrators. There it was. Thorn Parallel Group, still intact, still hidden in plain sight. I leaned back in my chair as the faint hum of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. 1,000 doubts raced through my mind, but one stubborn instinct refused to fade. If they were waiting for me to stumble, I wouldn't. Not silently, not without remembering who built the foundation beneath their feet. It happened late, on a Thursday night. The day ended like so many others. In silence, people passed by without a word. As if I were part of the furniture rather than a colleague, I stayed late, trying to get a jump on system validation logs before handing the work over to Zintrex. When I opened my laptop, a warning flashed. "Access denied, please contact your administrator." I frowned, refreshed the page, and tried again. Same message. I logged into a backup directory. Permission revoked. My pulse quickened. I restarted the VPN, double-checked credentials, ran diagnostics from a clean device. Still nothing. I called it. No answer. Tried again. Voicemail. I messaged Mira. "Are your credentials working?" 3 dots appeared, then her reply. "Yeah, all fine, why?" I didn't respond. I didn't have to. They had locked me out. Not sidelined. Not ignored, cut off completely. I sat motionless in the cold, fluorescent-lit quiet of the 17th floor. Then I stood and paced the perimeter, a loop I'd walked countless times during meetings in heels and headset. But this time, I didn't see my team. I saw ghosts. Empty chairs, turned backs, framed plaques with names I once respected, many now gone. I slammed the elevator button harder than necessary, rode down to the lobby, and stepped into the night air. Hoping it would give me a reason not to scream, I pulled out my phone and dialed Camille. She answered on the second ring. "Mel, they locked me out." A pause. "They what?" "They cut off my access. No warning. No formal notice I'm out of the system." I heard Camille take a sharp breath, then the tap-tap of her keyboard. "Well, that's interesting." "What?" "They sent us something 15 minutes ago." "Who?" "Zintrex." Another pause. "It's a final stage verification request. They want confirmation that Thorn Parallel Group is the licensed integrator for the infrastructure system." I blinked. "They think we're running the system." "No," Camille corrected. "They don't think. They know they're just covering their legal bases now. You're still listed as primary architect. They just didn't realize how much control you have over the licensing pipeline through Thorn." A bitter laugh stuck in my throat. "So they froze me out, assuming they had already absorbed my work and didn't realize," Camille finished, "that I was never operating under their terms." I hung up and leaned against the cold brick wall outside Galvic's tower, headlights cutting across wet pavement. Something fragile inside me cracked clean through I had given them everything. A decade of loyalty, missed holidays, late-night deliverables I had covered their chaos, fixed their blind spots, trained the very people now ignoring me in the hallways. And now, I was just erased. No meeting. No explanation. Just silence and revoked system access. I thought of Olivia, of Mark in Miami, of all the faces that once smiled but were now hollow. And I thought of Jared Vaughn, the way he hadn't even looked at me the day of the strategy meeting, how he spoke as if I weren't even there, even while I was still breathing in the room. He didn't just want me gone. He wanted me forgotten. I returned inside straight to my desk, retrieved my personal drive from the locked drawer, and copied the last clean build of the infrastructure framework not to use or leak, just to protect in case they tried to burn the whole thing down. I packed lightly. Just essentials. My laptop, that drive, and the notebook where I'd quietly tracked every move since the first signs of trouble. Then I opened a browser and booked a flight to the Penley Hotel on Monday, the day of Zintrex's final signing. I was going to be there, not because they invited me, but because I was the only one who truly knew what was being sold. When I stepped into the Penley Hotel lobby, my breath was steady, matching my steps. But don't mistake me. I was burning inside a slow fire, controlled, patient, strategic, not an explosion, but a simmer. It was exactly 3:15. The signing was set for 3:30. Everything about the room, the cold marble floors, the gentle hum of filtered air, the floral centerpiece, screamed celebration. Except no one met my gaze. Mira sat near the end of the table, nervously flipping through briefing papers. Her eyes glanced my way, then quickly looked away across the room. Olivia shuffled a stack of folders, pretending to read a junior associate I didn't know, whispered something in Olivia's ear. They laughed. Too forced, too loud. A rehearsed act for appearances and Jared Vaughn. Of course, he was nowhere in sight. He never confronted discomfort directly. Instead, he sent others to claim credit or deliver the blows I strode calmly past them all, my heels muffled on the hotel carpet. No greetings, no recognition, just me and the silence they wore like armor. Yet nobody stopped me. Not even Daniel Crane, the senior counsel from Zintrex, who glanced up with faint recognition and forced a tight smile. "Melody," he said, "didn't expect to see you here." I returned a measured, cool smile. Not warm, not wide. I thought I'd witnessed the finale. He nodded once, perhaps sensing more than I revealed. At 3:21, The pre-signing briefing began. Galvix's legal team skimmed the contract structure. Mira presented the handover protocol we'd rehearsed so many times we could recite it in our sleep, though now she avoided any eye contact. As she spoke, I leaned forward slightly, scanning the contract packet beside her. My eyes locked immediately on page 84, the technical appendix listing authorized infrastructure integrators number 1, redacted number 2, redacted number 3, Thorn Parallel Group, LLC, still there, untouched, buried like a trigger, silent and inert until noticed, which nobody had. They didn't realize what they were holding. The engine of the entire deal, the infrastructure blueprint, and the only entity legally allowed to validate its integration was me. I waited. At 3:25, contract packets were distributed. At 3:26, Galvix's attorney asked, "Are we ready for execution?" The Zintrex side nodded. My fingers moved before my voice could calm. Steady, I took a pen from the table, uncapped it, and opened the packet in front of me. Mira paused mid-sentence. Olivia tensed in her seat. Even Daniel leaned forward as I reached page 86, the signature block. No one said a word. No one stopped me, because no one truly understood what I was doing. I was already supposed to be gone. I hovered the pen just above the line. The silence in the room was heavy, almost artificial, as if sound had been squeezed out by tension. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. It was the reclamation of dignity, authorship of every late night, every red line, every version of the system they quietly tried to claim as theirs. And still, I said nothing, because that would have been too easy for them. Let them keep guessing. I signed with one clean, unwavering motion. When I handed the packet to Zintrex's legal team, no one asked whose name I'd written. No one checked the entity line at the bottom. Galvix staff clapped politely, as if they'd just sealed a deal they fully understood. But they hadn't, because they didn't know what they'd just let walk out the door. It's strange how quiet victory can be. No fanfare, no confetti, no cheers, just the sound of a pen sliding across paper and a choice that would change everything forever. Sitting at the long table in the Pendley Hotel conference room, beneath softly humming chandeliers and polished glasses, muted applause ringing around me, I flipped through the contract packet. Each page was crisp, thick, every clause polished by hours of legal work, a perfect illusion of order. But I wasn't there for ceremony. I was there to set the record straight across the table. Mira gave her final notes, reading handover procedures aloud like it wasn't all built during caffeine-fueled nights together. Ink smudged on her finger betrayed the truth. She'd been marking edits until the last second she didn't look at me. Hadn't for days. To my right, Olivia shifted uncomfortably, sensing tension but unwilling to voice it. She hadn't spoken to me since the realignment meeting where Jared undermined me in front of the board. Her silence then stung more than Jared's dismissal. But today, I wasn't asking anyone to speak. The legal packets had been distributed. All but one signature had been placed. Mine was the last line waiting. I flipped to the back, page 86. The signature page. I studied the text block at the bottom. Execution entity, Galvix Corporation. It stared back like a lie printed in Times New Roman. It didn't belong. Not anymore. Not after they'd erased my name from every thread, directory, and meeting room. They once begged me to fill with ideas. I reached into my folio and pulled out a different signature page, identical in formatting and language except for one correction. Execution entity, Thorn Parallel Group, LLC. It was already vetted, backed by the underlying architecture, licensing keys, deployment hooks, and modular encryption triggers, all traced back to Thorn, not Galvix, not Jared, but me. And they hadn't noticed. I slipped the new page seamlessly into the packet. Mira glanced up at that moment. Her eyes met mine, just briefly. But she understood she said nothing in a way. I appreciated that more than confrontation. She wasn't loyal to me anymore, not actively. But something in her decided not to stand in the way. I picked up the pen and stood. Daniel Crane, Zintrex's legal liaison, was reviewing compliance logs near the far wall. He didn't expect me to approach, which is why he blinked in surprise when I handed him a small silver USB. "This is the final framework package," I said softly. He raised an eyebrow. "From Galvix?" "From me," I corrected. "The working version, pre-deployment build, source-mapped, and fully licensed. The other version won't function without the integration key, and only one entity holds that key." His expression sharpened. "You're saying Galvix can't activate it? They can't even explain it." A pause. "But you can." He didn't argue, just nodded, slipped the USB into his folder, and walked off to inform his counsel back at the table. The packet lay quietly, innocent, legal, lethal. I opened it again, looked at the signature line, and with steady hand, signed, "This wasn't vengeance." Not really. It was for the weeks of silence, for those who turned their backs, for the meetings I led but wasn't invited to afterward, for being used then discarded. And most of all, for the system they never truly understood. Because if they had, they'd know not to leave me with the pen. I reached into my blazer pocket one last time. Inside was the silver ring I'd worn since being named lead architect. A quiet, personal token, not flashy, just a reminder of who I was at the start. I slipped it off and placed it on the table, right where Jared Vaughn's name should have been. No one stopped me. No one knew what to say. That's the beauty of working in silence. They never saw it coming. As I walked out of the Penley Hotel, I didn't look back. I didn't need to by the time they finally grasped what I had done. The ink was already dry, the contracts irreversible, and Thorne Parallel Group stood as the sole legal gatekeeper to the $950 million infrastructure they assumed they'd absorbed. In truth, they hadn't absorbed a thing. They had simply signed it over at precisely 8:02 a.m. The first email arrived, its subject line reading, "Zintrex finalizes historic merger with Thorne Parallel Group $900+ million deal confirmed by 8:03. Galvix's internal messaging system erupted in chaos. "What is this? Is that a typo? Did legal actually approve this wording? Who the hell is Thorne?" Within 2 minutes, someone forwarded the press release straight to Jared Vaughn's executive inbox. He didn't open it immediately, still at home, coffee with 3 sugars in hand, morning playlist humming softly, fully expecting to bask in headlines casting him as a master dealmaker. His assistant, Claire, interrupted mid-sip. "Jared, you need to read this now." He clicked, scanned the title, paused, reread it slowly, as if disbelief could delay the inevitable. There it was in bold beneath the headline. "Thorne Parallel Group LLC will serve as the exclusive integrator and system architect for all cross-jurisdictional infrastructure, as outlined in the final agreement signed at Penley Hotel on Monday." No mention of Galvix, no Jared Vaughn, no legacy. Just Thorne and a contract already registered, validated, and time-stamped by Camille's legal team 72 hours earlier back at Galvix's office. Chaos began quietly, emails flying, voices rising behind frosted glass. In less than 20 minutes, the full storm hit. Legal scrambled to retrieve the original contract. The problem? The signed packet at Pendley had already been submitted to the SEC and international compliance partners. No edits, no reversals, no second versions. Camille had ensured that at 8:15, Mira sat frozen before her screen. The legal email chain had ballooned to 56 messages, and counting. Someone mentioned irreversible execution. Quietly, she rose and left her desk to avoid the inevitable fallout. She didn't go far, just to a corner conference room where she'd often seen me sit in silence. She pulled out her phone and stared at it a long moment, then placed it face down without unlocking it. By 8:22, Jared was on the phone. "To be clear, Daniel, this is not the agreement I authorized. This is not what my team approved." Daniel Crane, Zintrex's senior legal liaison, stayed calm. "We have the execution copy. It matches the framework submitted in the legal appendix, page 84 lists, Thorn Parallel Group." "It's been there for months," Jared demanded. "I want to know who signed that clause." Daniel's reply was cold. "I believe you already do." Silence. Jared stood by the window, knuckles white, gripping the sill's edge outside. The skyline mocked him. A bright, clear day with headlines printing faster than he could deny them across town. In a co-working space, I sat in a corner booth, coffee untouched, watching news alerts roll in. My name wasn't in the headlines. Not directly. That was by design. Camille had advised me to keep it that way. "Let the company name bear the weight," she said. "You can keep your name for the next move." I agreed. This wasn't about ego. It was about clarity. Galvix thought removing me would remove the system instead. They severed their only real connection to it. At 8:30, Jared called an emergency executive meeting. People arrived half-dressed, half-informed, and fully panicked. The VP of Finance asked if this was a hack. The PR director wondered if the firm had accidentally signed a duplicate deal. No one had answers because the only person who could explain how Thorn became the execution entity had already left by 8:45. IT confirmed my access credentials remained blocked. My account had been inactive for over 48 hours. Yet somehow, I had signed the deal. Jared slammed his fist on the table. "I want every copy, every file, every record of who touched that clause." They searched his name in the submission packet. Once, twice, thrice. Nothing. Jared Vaughn, self-proclaimed architect of the Galvix-Zintrex merger, did not exist in the final documents far from the chaos. I finally sipped my lukewarm coffee and glanced again at the press release on my phone before closing it. They'd erased me, and in doing so, signed away the one thing they could never fake: authorship. Within 24 hours, Galvix began to bleed, not publicly at first, but internally. Emails pinged through departments like fire alarms. Legal pinged. It insisted no breaches occurred, no hacks detected. Yet the $950 million deal they'd celebrated was credited to a company most had never heard of: Thorn Parallel Group. By morning, the stock had dropped 6% by 11:02 a.m. Jared Vaughn was out. The board didn't meet in person. The call lasted 9 minutes. The announcement was sterile. "Mr. Vaughn has stepped down to pursue new opportunities." But inside the building, no explanation was needed. He had been erased. Just as he tried to erase me, I did not celebrate. I sat quietly in a co-working cafe 2 blocks from Galvix headquarters. Watching the fallout unfold on my laptop, headlines started cautious, then curious. By noon, they hinted at me indirectly. "Industry insider quietly transfers ownership rights mid-merger." Galvix caught off guard. How one line in a contract turned a tech titan into an outsider. The deal Galvix signed but never understood. Camille sent me a screenshot of an article and a simple message: "Clean your everywhere without being anywhere." I replied with a single emoji, a chess piece. The queen in Galvix's legal game. The mood was ruthless. An emergency audit found no violations, no unauthorized actions, no sabotage. Metadata matched Thorn's filings. The clause naming Thorn as integrator had been signed months earlier, passing through 4 separate hands during version reviews. A new paralegal whispered, "It was like she laid the fuse before they even knew there was fire." Another said, "She didn't lay it. She built the whole damn matchbox." Attempts to challenge the transfer found no grounds. I'd committed no breach. I simply let them walk into a structure they never bothered to read. By early afternoon, Jared's office was cleared. His assistant, who once filtered every move, locked the door silently. Some executives celebrated his fall behind closed doors, but most knew they were next finger-pointing erupted on every floor, briefing legal pointed fingers at strategy for overlooking the clause, while strategy blamed engineering for failing to safeguard proprietary infrastructure. Engineering fired back that legal had signed off on every detail meanwhile. HR moved quietly between departments, trying to pinpoint exactly when I'd been off-boarded and who had given the approval. No one could say that night a message arrived, not from Camille or legal, but from Olivia Tran, whose name held more history than heat. I should have spoken up at that meeting. I saw what was happening. I froze. Kept telling myself, say something. But I didn't. I lacked the courage to stand up for you. I'm sorry. I sat motionless for a long moment, rereading her words. It wasn't bitterness that welled up, not exactly, but something quieter, like grief. Not because Olivia had betrayed me, but because she'd been one of the few I'd silently hoped would defend me. The satisfaction was genuine. I had outmaneuvered them all, but at a cost. Not in numbers or reputation, but in realizing that loyalty, the kind I once offered freely, rarely survives ambition I typed back. I understand. I just wish it hadn't taken this for you to remember who I was. Then I deleted the message, closed my phone, and let the silence settle. There were no cheers on the rooftop, no claps in boardrooms, no ceremonial toasts. Just the soft clink of wine against steel railings, the steady pulse of the Seattle skyline beneath us, and two women who knew exactly what they'd done and why they needed no one else's approval. I stood at the edge of the rooftop terrace, arms resting lightly on the railing, wine warming my hand. The air was crisp, scented faintly with sea salt and blooming jasmine. Camille was barefoot, having slipped off her heels minutes after we arrived. "Did it feel the way you expected?" she asked, joining me at the edge. Her voice calm and slow. I took a sip and said honestly, "No, it felt quieter." She nodded. Clean winds always do. We'd booked the top floor of a boutique hotel in Belltown, not for celebration, but to decompress. No press invited, no selfies. Just a bottle of red from Camille's private stash, and 2 hours of uninterrupted silence. For the first time in months, I could breathe. "So," Camille said, "I talked with Zintrex." I turned to her, amused. "That didn't take long." "They've been watching from the start," she said. "They knew your fingerprints were all over the system. They just didn't expect you to own it so surgically." I raised an eyebrow. "They want to make you Chief Strategy Officer." Camille continued. "Direct report to the CEO, Full Operational Freedom Global Team Equity Options." I didn't answer right away. I let the city breathe beneath me, muscles relaxing against the cool metal railing. It would be easy to say yes, to take the role Galvix had always dangled before me, only now with real power, leverage, recognition. But something inside resisted. "Camille," I said at last, "I'm not looking for another tower to climb. I want space to build something that isn't owned the moment it's done." She cocked her head. "So you're saying no?" "I'm saying," I replied, turning fully to her, "if they're serious, let's make it a partnership. Thorne stays independent. I stay outside, they bring vision. I architect systems on contract. They gain agility. I keep autonomy." Camille smiled. "I'll draft it tonight." Later, after she took a call from a Zintrex board member downstairs, I remained alone on the terrace. The city stretched wide and flickering, alive but unhurried. For once, it wasn't waiting on me. I pulled out my phone and opened the contact I'd stared at for weeks. Mom. There had been no argument, no cold silence, just slow erosion. Long nights, unanswered texts, missed calls filled with gentle disappointment. I tapped the screen, held it to my ear. It rang once, twice, then. "Hello." Her voice was soft, tinged with surprise. I closed my eyes and let it settle. "It's me," I said. "I should have called sooner." A pause. "I'm just glad you're calling now." My throat tightened. I finished something big, important, but it didn't matter unless I could share it with you. We spoke of small things. The garden, the rain, her newfound obsession with fermented garlic. No contracts, no Jared just warmth, just voice before hanging up. I whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." She replied simply, "Never." When the call ended, I stood alone in silence. A different kind, not the weapon they wielded against me in Galvix's halls, but something lighter. Earned, I gazed at the skyline, inhaled deeply, no deadlines, no decks to revise, no metrics to defend, only options, space, only the sound of my own thoughts, unfiltered, unjudged, finally free. Freedom wasn't a door kicked open. It was a rooftop, a glass of wine, and the absence of apology. Many think power is loud. Shouts, slammed doors, dramatic showdowns. They imagine retaliation as explosive, theatrical, echoing through corridors, making people flinch. But I learned something different. True power doesn't shout. It signs 3 days after that rooftop night in Seattle. I returned to my apartment smaller than anything I could now afford, but still scented with lavender oil and fresh ink. 2 things I always used to stay grounded. My plants survived the chaos. My books waited on the shelf, untouched but familiar. I poured tea, not wine, then opened my laptop. My inbox flooded with expected follow-ups from Zintrex Legal, NDAs from media seeking statements, at least a dozen congratulations from old contacts pretending they'd always believed. But one email stood out. No subject, no signature, just a single line. "Thank you. You made me believe I could finally stand up too." I stared long and hard. No name, no context, no follow-up. But it landed harder than any headline, somewhere inside Galvix, Zintrex, or countless tech firms watching this unfold. Someone had been paying attention, someone who'd seen me pushed aside, ignored, undermined, and thought that's just how the game works. Until I showed them otherwise, I closed my laptop slowly, hands relaxed, not clenched, not angry, but with closure. This wasn't vengeance. It wasn't about redemption. It was a complete redefinition she reflected on that day at the Pendley Hotel. How nobody met her gaze, how Jared was conspicuously absent, how the silence was so thick it almost made her question her existence. But she was there, undeniably, and when they believed she was gone, she rewrote the narrative. No shouting, no threats. Just one last page and a pen in the right hand. In the end, they didn't remember her because she yelled. They remembered her because she didn't have to. When the whole system collapsed, every piece still traced back to the same architecture. Hers. The clauses, the structure, the licensing, the blueprint of the deal that had made them millionaires or destroyed their careers. She built it. And when they tried to erase her, they only erased their own access, Camille called that afternoon. "They're still untangling Jared's mess," she said. "But it doesn't matter anymore. Zintrex signed the revised partnership this morning. Thorne has full strategic rights on the next 2 system builds." Melody nodded. "We'll do it right this time." "No panic," Camille replied. "Just precision." They said goodbye without small talk. As the sun dipped beneath the skyline, Melody settled at her desk by the window. The city buzzed outside, alive with fresh stories, new players, deals drafted by those who still believed the loudest voice always wins. She knew better now. She didn't need noise. She only needed her name on the page, on the clause, on the structure. That was enough, because silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's the space where real work happens, where power shifts, foundations move, and a woman no one expected quietly rewrites everything, fully and under no banner but her own. And if you've ever been talked over, erased, or underestimated, know this. You don't have to shout to be heard, you just need to outlast the noise. Sometimes, the loudest revenge is survival with your name intact. If Melody's story moved you, share your thoughts below, your moments of breaking silence, your quiet victories. And if you're ready for more stories of justice, power, and reinvention, hit subscribe together. We'll build something stronger.